Hello everyone. Today let us talk about a condition that quietly affects millions of people across India simply because of the water they drink every day. This is the National Program for Prevention and Control of Fluorosis, a comprehensive strategy launched by the Directorate General of Health Services under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Let us begin by understanding fluorine itself. It is nature's most reactive element, and in its pure gaseous form, it is never found freely in nature. Once it enters our body, about 96% of the total fluoride accumulates in our bones and teeth. Fluorine is essential for normal mineralization of bones and for the formation of healthy dental enamel. However, its high reactivity means that prolonged ingestion beyond safe limits becomes a serious public health risk. Fluoride works like a two-edged sword. If the concentration in water is less than 0.5 mg per liter, it leads to deficiency, which shows up as dental caries or cavities. The optimal requirement for India is between 0.5 and 0.8 mg per liter, which supports healthy enamel and bone formation. The Bureau of Indian Standards has set the desirable limit at 1 mg per liter. But once levels cross 1.5 mg per liter, dental fluorosis begins to appear. Between 3 and 6 mg per liter, skeletal fluorosis develops, and beyond 10 mg per liter, the person enters a crippling state with permanent disability. This spectrum can be understood as three zones. Below 0.5 mg per liter is the hypostate or deficiency zone, which is the primary cause of dental caries in children and requires water fluoridation and topical treatments. Between 0.5 and 1 mg per liter is the safety threshold, where fluoride functions as an essential element for bone and dental health. Beyond that, from 1 to 10 mg per liter and above is the hyperstate of chronic toxicity, leading to endemic fluorosis, multi-organ cellular damage, and irreversible developmental effects. Four factors determine how fluorosis manifests in an individual. These are the age of exposure, nutritional status, the cumulative quantity ingested, and the efficiency of kidney clearance. Now let us look at how fluorosis affects different parts of the body. In the teeth, especially in children, dental fluorosis develops during the first 7 years when active calcification is taking place. Early signs include loss of shine and chalky white patches, while severe cases show brown or yellow streaks, horizontal pitting, and a corroded appearance. In the gut and nervous system, non-skeletal fluorosis is often the earliest clinical indicator, showing as abdominal pain, constant nausea, and loss of appetite. Renal and nerve involvement causes muscle weakness, excessive thirst known as polydipsia, and frequent urination known as polyuria. In the spine and joints, skeletal fluorosis requires lifetime intake of 3 to 6 mg per liter or more, and crippling effects appear above 10 mg per liter. This causes extensive calcium deposition, permanent disability, joint calcification, and spinal rigidity, sometimes called poker spine, which is visible as severe sclerosis on radiographs. In the lower limbs, children can develop genu valgum or knock knee, a pediatric syndrome involving severe osteoporosis. This has been heavily reported in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu and is directly linked to agricultural staples like sorghum or jowar, which promotes high fluoride retention in the body. The global and national burden of fluorosis is significant. More than 260 million people worldwide live in areas where natural drinking water exceeds the 1.5 mg per liter threshold, making this a multi-continent endemic challenge. In India alone, around 25 million people are affected and 66 million more are at risk. This is due to toxic groundwater leaching from geological rocks, and cases have been reported across 17 to 23 states. Overall dental fluorosis prevalence stands at 34.5%, rising to 38.1% in vulnerable rural populations. The National Program for Prevention and Control of Fluorosis has evolved over time. It was launched between 2008 and 2009 during the 11th five-year plan as a fully centrally sponsored scheme covering 100 target districts between 2012 and 2017. During the 12th five-year plan, it expanded with a 75 to 25 funding pattern between the center and states, covering 163 districts across 19 states and union territories, and was integrated into the National Health Mission Flexi Pool. From 2024 onward, the program has aligned with the Jal Jeevan Mission, shifting its focus toward root cause elimination by providing safe piped surface drinking water and working to fully eradicate contaminated sources. The mission architecture of the program rests on a clear primary goal, which is to prevent, control, and mitigate the irreversible effects of fluorosis disease across India. This is achieved through three broad approaches. First, targeting and assessment through baseline surveillance using fluoride data from the Ministry of Jal Shakti to identify, test, and map high risk habitations. Second, building capacity through institutional readiness by training grassroots health workers and medical officers and establishing dedicated district laboratories equipped with ion meters. Third, comprehensive management through treatment and rehabilitation, ranging from dietary micronutrient supplementation with calcium, vitamin C and D, and antioxidants to reconstructive surgery and physical rehabilitation for skeletal deformities. The program follows a unified organogram from national leadership down to grassroots implementation. At the national level, the Directorate General of Health Services and the Nutrition and Iodine Deficiency Disorders Cell coordinate funding, budgets, and cross-state execution. At the state level, the state nodal officer manages field coordination and data flow to the center, while the State Health Society oversees fiscal governance of National Health Mission funds and midterm evaluations. At the district level, the district nodal officer, usually the chief medical officer, acts as the district commander overseeing recruitment, supported by district consultants and lab technicians who manage surveys and laboratory testing. At the grassroots level, medical officers at primary and community health centers act as clinical gatekeepers, conducting preliminary examinations and referrals, while community workers such as ASHAs and ANMs serve as frontline educators, identifying suspected pediatric cases and distributing information, education, and communication materials. This translates into a tiered implementation strategy across 5 levels. At the central level, there is national policy stewardship, national health mission budget management, and countrywide performance audits. At the state level, action plans are formulated and operational monitoring addresses gaps. At the district level, local baseline data is aggregated to map hotspots, and specialized diagnostic and surgical rehabilitative services are established. At the primary and community health center level, medical officers review comprehensive clinical histories, conduct spot urine testing, refer severe skeletal or compressive myelopathy cases, and distribute calcium and vitamin supplements. And at the community and village level, field workers conduct water mapping using a color code of green for safe and red for hazardous, sensitize ashas and teachers, and carry out school screening and home-to-home visits for provisional diagnosis. For new districts entering the program, there is a structured 4-month initialization phase of 120 days. This begins with recruitment of qualified technical and clinical contract staff, followed by laboratory standardization through procurement and calibration of modern ion meters, and finally training drills to establish cohorts for medical staff and field inspectors. Villages are then sampled based on water fluoride levels in a stratified design. Strata 1 covers mild levels of 1 to 3 parts per million, targeted for localized monitoring and educational outreach. Strata 2 covers moderate levels of 3.1 to 5 parts per million, which warrants complete door-to-door physical examinations. Strata 3 covers extreme levels above 5 parts per million, which mandates immediate water source isolation and clinical interventions. The analytical laboratory standards followed in this program are quite specific. The process begins with sample capture, collecting a 30 milliliter spot urine sample. A critical constraint here is that only high density plastic screw capped bottles must be used, never glass. Next comes preservation, where 1 to 2 drops of toluene are added to create a protective surface layer that preserves sample integrity during transport. Then comes lab testing, conducted through an ion selective electrode, and it is mandatory to use an ion meter only to prevent diagnostic errors that were common with older testing methods. Finally, reporting involves consolidating village level analytical data and submitting it directly to the Directorate General of Health Services in New Delhi for national surveillance mapping. The intervention framework of the program rests on 4 pillars. The first is capacity building, involving tiered training durations such as 1-day seminars for medical officers and doctors on referral pathways and half-day practical training for ASHAs and ANMs on clinical identification. The second is medical and surgical management, involving nutritional supplementation with calcium, vitamin C, vitamin D, and antioxidants to mitigate damage, along with decompression surgeries, corrective plaster of Paris casts, and physiotherapy for severe skeletal cases. The third is information, education, and communication campaigns, engaging communities through street plays known as Nukkad Nataks, local radio spots, and wall paintings to help identify safe water sources and promote shifts in diet. The fourth pillar is surveillance and mapping. Let us look more closely at each component. Component 1 is surveillance and mapping, which works across 3 areas. Water quality analysis involves integration with the Public Health Engineering Department to locate unsafe groundwater wells, systematic mapping and color coding of village drinking sources as green for safe and red for unsafe, and regular monitoring checks on surface water installations. Community field surveys involve random baseline screenings mandated in at least 20 households per village, demographic screening across pediatric and adult groups to assess skeletal rigidity prevalence, and collection of dietary, age, and clinical health history profiles. Primary school surveys target children aged 6 to 11 years in classes 3 to 5 using dental and bone examination as the primary diagnostic tool to trace dental fluorosis and early bone deformities, along with assessment of local dietary factors in high exposure childhood zones. Component 2 is capacity building and staffing. Each district requires a specific staffing profile consisting of one district consultant who manages plans and surveillance, one lab technician dedicated to ion meter assessments, and 3 field investigators who execute village and household mapping. The training matrix follows multiple levels. Medical officers receive 2 days of technical training focused on clinical identification, differential diagnosis, and patient care. Laboratory technicians receive 5 days of technical training focused on ion meter operation, ion selective electrode handling, and lab quality control. Grassroots workers such as ASHAs, ANMs, and teachers receive ongoing sensitization programs focused on identifying pediatric fluorosis warning signs and program synchronization. Component 3 is medical and surgical management, which follows a care continuum across 3 blocks. Block 1 is medical and nutritional care involving supplementation therapy with calcium, vitamin C, vitamin D, and antioxidants. Here, vitamin C promotes kidney clearance of fluoride, while calcium reduces its absorption in the gut. and non-steroidal drugs are used for pain management of joints. Block 2 is physical rehabilitation, involving mobility aids such as crutches and wheelchairs for severe skeletal fluorosis, deformity correction through corrective plaster of Paris casts for early bone curvatures in children, and physiotherapy to restore mobility and reduce joint rigidity. Block 3 is tertiary surgical care, involving spinal decompression through urgent neurosurgery for spinal canal narrowing or compressive myelopathy, bone interventions for stabilizing pathological fractures, and joint arthroplasty, which is reconstructive surgery for extreme joint contractures. Component 4 is health education and information, education, and communication strategy, organized into 3 tracks. Track 1 is information campaigns for awareness using broad media such as local television, community radio, and press releases. Folk media such as street plays in rural hubs, and print materials such as visual pamphlets, posters, and diagnostic checklists in local dialects. Track 2 is diet editing counseling for behavior change, promoting intake of foods naturally rich in calcium, vitamin C, and iron, actively educating communities to avoid kala namak or black rock salt, which harbors high fluoride concentrations, and instructing against the use of high fluoride toothpastes in endemic regions. Track 3 is safe water practices for infrastructure shift, promoting village level rainwater harvesting to recharge clean water tables, shifting reliance toward treated surface water resources such as rivers and canals, and promoting household defluoridation filters using the Nalgonda technique where piped water is not available. Looking at this program through a SWOT analysis gives us a balanced picture. Its strengths lie in structured block by block and school surveillance models, active medical and nutritional support for clinical relief, and rigorous capacity standards through specialized ion meters. Its weaknesses include the fact that advanced skeletal fluorosis remains medically irreversible and incurable, slow surveillance rollout timelines in remote areas, and a chronic shortage of qualified rural laboratory technicians. Its opportunities include complete integration with the Jal Jeevan Mission for permanent clean piped water, promotion of community kitchen gardens for better calcium intake, and the use of artificial intelligence and geospatial modeling for modern hazard mapping. Its threats include climate driven water scarcity that may alter and raise natural fluoride levels, lags in coordination between health departments and public health engineering departments, and deeply ingrained cultural practices such as the continued use of Kala Namak. In conclusion, the National Program for Prevention and Control of Fluorosis goes far beyond simply treating a disease. It integrates epidemiological surveillance, grassroots human capacity building, and high level infrastructural change. It rests on 3 pillars: safe water, medical intervention, and community education. By aligning clinical diagnostics such as ion meters and medical officers with environmental engineering through the Jal Jeevan Mission and Public Health Engineering Department, and with community behavior change through diet editing, India is steadily working to dismantle a crippling yet entirely preventable public health crisis. Hope you have understood about the given topic, National Program for Prevention and Control of Fluorosis. If you found this video useful, please like and share with your friends and colleagues. Thank you.